Edvard Munch was a famous Norwegian painter. He was born in 1863, was devoted to painting by the age of 17, internationally successful by 1902, and died in 1944. One of Munch's most well-known works is titled The Scream. The Scream was created in 1893, and the National Gallery Oslo currently holds this piece of artwork. Munch's The Scream is a brilliant work of symbolism, which was an international movement that took place in the late 19th century. Symbolists opposed the values of rationalism and material progress that dominated modern Western culture and instead explored the non-material realms of emotion, imagination, and spirituality. This notion of divergence from what was expected in that time period portrays our group's central theme, dissonance. Dissonance is an instance in which thoughts, music, objects, and physical artwork portray a feeling that is inconsistent and shows disagreement with the world and time period which it is surrounded. For Munch, his painting, The Scream, is an example of profound dissonance by its imposing of new ideas on Western culture. He sought a deeper and more mysterious reality than found in everyday life, which he conveyed through his ambiguous subject matter with suggestive, hidden, and elusive meanings. Instead of painting the objective world, he wanted to transform the painting into something that was more dreamlike. Edvard Munch merges symbolist suggestiveness with expressionist intensity of feeling. The Scream, painted by Edvard Munch, is one of the most well-known pieces of artwork in history, appealing to a wide audience due to its numerous ways of interpretation. The medium used on this painting was oil, tempera, and pastel on cardboard. The focal point is clearly the centralized figure in the middle of the painting. The centralized figure has a rounded face resembling a skull without any specific facial features. This makes it possible to create a connection with all people. The face of the figure is also able to create a mood of anxiety and fear. The vertical line of the bridge points to the two figures on the left side corner of the painting. This line alludes to the sense of isolation for the central figure. The artist's active and dynamic use of curving lines and strong colors gives the composition an intense energy. The unclear scenery keeps the viewer's eyes continually being brought back to the focal point of the centralized figure. The fluid brush strokes cause the scene to appear to swirl, giving it a sense of motion. The painting's dissonant colors enhance the intensity of the linear forms. The Scream's timeless image is a genderless person with a pale face, standing beside a railing with an expansive view of a chaotic environment. What is so gripping about this image is that the person is screaming with their mouth hung wide open and their hands on the side of their face. The figure's scream is reflected and continuing onto the distance of that intensely red, orange, deep blue, and black colored background. He liked to add shadows and auras of color around his main subjects to add to the intensity of their emotions. Many people agree that the way Edvard Munch portrayed pure, raw emotion in his artwork was a radical shift from the art tradition of his own time.
Sarah Winchester was the wife of William Wirt Winchester, the manufacturer of the famous Winchester repeating rifle. After the death of her daughter Annie in 1866 and her husband 15 years later, Mrs. Winchester sought the advice of a medium. The medium explained that Mrs. Winchester was being haunted by the spirits of those who were killed by the Winchester rifle. She urged Mrs. Winchester to move west and build a house that would invite the good spirits in and keep the bad spirits out. Mrs. Winchester took the medium's advice, moving to San Jose, California, and beginning construction on what is now known as the Winchester Mystery House. She designed the house herself without any blueprints or plans. Instead, every night she would gather ideas from the spirits whom she was in contact with, and then give her foreman instructions in the morning. Construction workers worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until Mrs. Winchester's death in 1922. The mansion is made up of 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, and 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. When visiting, one can easily see how the Winchester Mystery House could be described as dissonant. It is both beautiful and bizarre, the two themes conflicting with one another. The outside of the house features Queen Anne Victorian architecture with features such as turrets, towers, cornices, and balconies. While the outside is beautiful and carefully constructed, the inside is confusing and weird. There are doors and staircases that go nowhere, windows built into the floor, and over 100 rooms that have no logical pattern. The house easily embodies the theme of dissonance by representing conflicting elements within the external and internal architecture. The house also shows dissonance through its conflict with the time period in which it was built. The conveniences built into the house were extremely rare at the time. These included steam and forced air heating, push-button gas lights, and a hot shower provided by the indoor plumbing. The house also featured 3 elevators, one of which was powered by a rare horizontal hydraulic elevator piston. These additions could be considered lavish and extravagant in comparison with the early 20th century standards. Mrs. Winchester's forward-thinking and continual support of new technology was at odds with the socio-economic culture at the time, as most could never hope to afford these extra amenities. Through the theme of dissonance, we see that the Winchester Mystery House is inconsistent with not only with the time period in which it was built, but also within itself.
Alban Berg was an Austrian composer who wrote atonal and 12-tone compositions. Born on February 9, 1885 in Vienna, Berg composed orchestral music, chamber music, songs, and 2 groundbreaking operas, Bozic and Lulu, which all reflected and remained true to the 19th century Romanticism era he was a part of, as well as the Second Viennese School, which consisted of himself, Arnold Schoenberg, and Anton Webern. Berg worked the concept of dissonance into all of his pieces. One of the most prominent and best examples of dissonance heard in his violin concerto, which you can hear Leonid Kogan playing now. The concerto is divided into 2 movements, which are both divided into 2 sections, and is scored for 2 flutes, 2 oboes, alto saxophone, 2 clarinets, bass clarinets, 2 bassoons, contrabassoon, 4 horns, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, tuba, timpani, percussion, harp, and strings. Like the previous works of art, as with all dissonant art, the concerto causes a certain sense of unease and discomfort to the listener. This is primarily achieved through the atonal melody, lack of clear focal points, and intensity and sharpness of the notes being played. It is very unbalanced and elicits a strong negative emotion for the audience, which is perhaps the primary goal of dissonant art. The artist's wish to make their viewer uneasy plays a significant role in dissonance, and it is clear that all 3 examples presented did well in this regard.